In 1907 a young Englishwoman, Lucy Honeychurch, and her cousin and chaperone, Charlotte Bartlett, stay at the pension Bertolini while on holiday in Florence. They are disappointed their rooms lack a view of the River Arno as promised. At dinner they meet other English guests. The Reverend Mr. Beebe, two elderly spinster sisters, the Mrs. Allen, romance author Eleanor Lavish, the free-thinking Mr. Emerson and his quiet, handsome son, George. Learning about Charlotte and Lucy's disappointment at not having a view of the river. Mr. Emerson and George offer to exchange rooms. Though Charlotte considers the suggestion indelicate, Mr. Beebe mediates and the switch is made. While touring the Piazza della Signoria the next day, Lucy witnesses a local man being brutally stabbed and killed. She faints, but George Emerson appears and comes to her aid. When Lucy has recovered, the two have a brief but unchaperoned discussion before returning to the pension. Later Charlotte, Lucy and the Emersons join other British tourists for a day trip to the Fiesole countryside. On the way, the carriage driver canoodles with his girlfriend sitting beside him, which upsets Reverend Eager. The girlfriend is asked to get off the carriage in the middle of the countryside to avoid further canoodling. Wishing to engage in gossip unsuitable for Lucy, Charlotte Bartlett and Miss Lavish encourage her to go for a walk, and Lucy goes looking for Mr. Beebe, the Italian driver, possibly misunderstanding Lucy's awkward Italian. Instead leads her to where George Emerson is admiring the view from a hillside. Seeing Lucy across a poppy field, he suddenly embraces and passionately kisses her. Charlotte appears and intervenes, worried that Lucy's mother will consider her an inadequate chaperone. Charlotte swears Lucy to secrecy and cuts their trip short. Upon returning to Surrey in England, Lucy says nothing to her mother about the incident and pretends to forget it. She is soon engaged to Cecil Vyse, a wealthy and socially prominent man who is cold, snobbish and pretentious. Cecil loves Lucy, but he and his mother consider the Honeychurch family their social inferiors, which offends Mrs. Honeychurch. Lucy soon learns that Mr. Emerson is moving into Sir Harry Otway's rental cottage, with George visiting at weekends. Lucy intended the two Mrs. Allen to live there and is cross with Cecil on learning that through a chance meeting with the Emersons in London Cecil recommended the cottage to them. He proclaims his motive was to annoy Sir Harry, whom Cecil considers a snob. He assumes Harry will find the Emersons too common. George's presence upends Lucy's life and her suppressed feelings for him surface. Meanwhile, Lucy's brother, Freddie, becomes friends with George. Freddie invites George to play tennis at Windy Corner, the Honeychurch home, during which Cecil mockingly reads aloud from Miss Lavish's latest novel set in Italy. Cecil, still reading, is oblivious when George passionately kisses Lucy in the garden. As Cecil continues reading aloud, Lucy recognizes a scene as being identical to her encounter with George in Fiesole. She confronts Charlotte, who admits to telling Miss Lavish about the kiss in the poppy field, who then used it in her story. Lucy orders George to leave Windy Corner and never return. He says that Cecil sees her only as a possession and will never love her for herself, as he would. Lucy seems unmoved but soon after ends her engagement to Cecil, saying they are incompatible. To escape the ensuing fallout, she arranges to travel to Greece with the Mrs. Allen. George, unable to be around Lucy, arranges for his father to move to London, unaware that Lucy is no longer engaged. When Lucy calls at Mr. Beebe's home to fetch Charlotte, she is confronted by Mr. Emerson, who happens to be there. She finally realizes and admits her true feelings for George. At the end, Newlyweds George and Lucy honeymoon at the Italian pension where they met. In the room with a view overlooking Florence's Duomo.